Hello, welcome to Autocar and a drive of the new all singing all dancing Aston Martin Vantage, which may not look so different from the old one from the outside, but I can tell you that the restyle, more muscly, a bit wider than it was, a bit more pronounced than it was, actually hides a vast number of changes under the skin. Let's start with the big one, which is the huge number increase of power on the engine. Hang on. It's a Mercedes AMG 4-litre V8 as usual. However, so changed is it, it even has the block has a new part number. There are new internals, there are new turbochargers. Power is up from just over 500 horsepower before to 656 now. So it's had something like 150 brake horsepower change, like 30% up. Torque is up quite a lot. It's now 510 foot-pounds, I think, 800 Newton meters. But the reason I'm showing it to you as well is that, come in, Jack, have a look at this. The chassis is a development of the one that went before, but it is hugely increased in strength in terms of what they call local or nodal stiffness. So while the sort of overall global stiffness, as in when you twist a chassis like that, the number may not be vastly increased, they don't quote one. The stuff that happens locally, so these longitudinal beams are tied together better at the front. This new strut brace is much stiffer and lighter than the one that went before. And the idea is the more you can tie down the chassis stiffness, the better the suspension is allowed to work. So as we come round to the back, go on, open up, there we go. Sounds good, doesn't it? There is this strut brace in the boot as well. And the idea is that the adaptive dampers, they have a much broader spread of stiffness to softness than they had before, to just let everything work and breathe that much better. Aston talks about how their cars should ride on the road. They should be able to breathe and it also be tied down when they want it to. But there's some big changes inside too. Jack, if you come around, have a look at the inside. Now, if you saw our DB12 Aston video recently, and I recommend you do, there is a lot of carryover from the DB12 to this interior. Quality is really high. I absolutely adore these little rotary switches. It sounds like being at Le Mans down this straight. It's so cool. Aston is also wedded still to permanent switch gear, which I like, physical switches. It's a much nicer cabin than it was previously. It's really, really nicely put together. This car is, of course, a bit shorter than a DB12 and much more agile, they reckon. But we are going to go for a drive. I'll take one for a drive on track and on the road to find out. Stay tuned. Righto, so let's consider the car on the road first and run through all the aspects of it one by one. Interior quality is really nice. This stuff came into use on the DB12 very recently. There are these lovely roller switches for the temperature and the fan. There's a lot of other supplementary physical switch gear which I like very much. If there is a thing, just this door pull there just is a little bit loose, but that may be a pre-production part. In general, this is a really nice feeling, really well finished interior, lovely carbon fibre with a colour on it. In this example, a steering wheel that is nearly round and a very good driving position. I've raised the seat up a little bit just so I can see a bit of the bonnet. If you are too low, it's quite easy to sort of lose sight of the bonnet. The window line is very high. There is a very sort of letterboxy windscreen and view out of the back. From that point of view, and I think this is a sort of Vantage thing that has happened ever since this car first made its debut. It is a car in which you sit in and it feels quite big around you. I remember saying something similar on a generation or two ago. Vantage, you know, it is a car that sort of seems to stick out wider than, say, a 911. The modern 911 also feels quite high in its windows and its stern, but there were times when it had sort of better visibility. Drive modes. Let's consider there are 5 of them. Wet is has the same sort of damper rates as the standard mode, which is called Sport, but it has a much tighter stability control system, so we won't worry about that because it is not wet. Sport is what it defaults to when you turn it on, and that is kind of a all-road kind of setup. It has adaptive dampers. It has an electronically controlled differential. those talk to each other. They talk to the steering, they talk to your throttle inputs, they talk to your braking inputs to try and blend it all together to try and give you the response that you want. There is no active rear wheel steer as there is in some other cars. Aston has tried it, said that in a car of this length, it just didn't need it to work, didn't feel as natural as a car without it. And in fact, I get it, there are not that many cars with active rear steer that always feel natural. Porsche does it best, I think, when it comes to rear steering. Steering is electrically assisted, power assisted these days. It's sort of about 2.3 turns to lock 2.2 to 2.4, something like that, which is reasonably quick, and the turning circle feels reasonably good at low speeds, but it is not a nervous feeling rack. I think a Ferrari Roma's rack is probably faster and nervier. This has a more stable centre to it. There are two weights of steering. Pick your preferred one. This is the sort of lighter one, and even then it's not that light, it's kind of medium plus weighted, and I don't mind that at all. I don't need a heavier one. The dampers have 3 modes. So this is Sport, which is the standard one. You can just ping that button through to Sport Plus. That firms everything up a bit. This is a reasonably smooth road. It's not as bumpy as most UK roads, and Sport Plus gets too much for it. It's severe. There's too much vertical movement, and if you go into track, which we will try on track later, then it's really firm. Aston says that actually that is kind of meant for very smooth circuits, and in fact it says that on the Monte Blanco circuit, where I'll be in a bit, actually Sport Plus or even Sport are better than track. The throttle map is also adjusted as you go through the drive modes. The 5th of those drive modes, by the way, is called individual, where you can set up what you want to set up. The throttle response is good. I'll extend the engine properly on circuit, but meanwhile on the road let's take control, press manual, take control of the gears myself. This is about 40 miles an hour. The engine will take sort of 6th gear at that point, so it's 1500 revs. You don't get that much. It takes about sort of 1800 revs to get going, but this is a broadly torquey engine. I will drive it around, making very brisk progress. That's 3000 revs. It's got a great response, makes a really impressive noise. It will rev around to 7, I'll get to that a bit later. It drives the rear wheels through that ZF 8-speed fully automatic torque converter transmission. Aston says it has experimented with twin clutch gearboxes. Some rivals do have a twin clutch gearbox. There is a natural sort of torque limit that twin clutch gearboxes like to handle, and the Aston makes quite a lot of torque, so it's sometimes suits a revier engine in a twin clutch box. Braking feel is good. And again, Aston says it's worked on the brakes. Carbon ceramics are an option. It's worked on the brake feel, that they should be basically both the same as each other, and the idea would be that you don't really notice the ride quality difference between a metal disc or a carbon ceramic disc. Brake feel is firm, and that's deliberate. They have deliberately firmed up the brake pedal feel, so you get something really to press and lean against. And that is replicated in a way by the way this rides, steers and handles. It is important, I think, that an Aston breathes when it comes to ride quality. It's not me who thinks this, they think that too. It shouldn't jar as you ride along. It should stay pretty flat on poor surfaces, because this is, although it is a sports car, and Aston's most sporting car of the moment, it is still an Aston Martin. And so in sport damping mode that we're in now, it does breathe a bit. You get to a corner, there's some body lean to lean up against, and they blend the way the e-diff works and the brakes work and the dampers work. They can soften a damper in one corner to try and help the car feel like it's turning in, and then on the way out they would stiffen a damper to feel like it's giving support to the back. And some of the underbody changes, particularly around local stiffness and sort of nodal stiffness, mean that that suspension is allowed to work in the way that it wants, and there isn't any take up of slack in the chassis that the suspension and the steering are having to cope with. The rack is now solidly mounted to the steering column is now solidly mounted to the chassis, whereas previously there was bushing in it. They've managed to tune out any lack of refinement that would bring, because it's an electrically assisted system. And the result is, on the road, very successful. It feels like it pivots sort of around its middle. It all feels very naturally tuned. It's a very natural feeling car. It's got good agility to it. I've been driving along sort of around 3,000 RPM, maybe 1,000 RPM either side of 3, and it's making really terrific progress. There's a little crackle there. It's basically a really nice feeling car. You know, you just sort of get the front planted by sort of trailing the brakes, which is easily done because it's just really easy to bleed them off because they're so progressive and responsive and linear. Then you get back on the power, and away it goes down the next straight. Really lovely, really nice. I wonder if a Ferrari Roma would feel more agile. I suspect so, because it's a slightly sort of flightier feeling, higher revving, sharper steering car. But this Aston is really characterful, really enjoyable. They've got to make a terrific road car. I'm intrigued to see what the on-limit handling is like, so we'll go and do that in a second. I can drive this and enjoy this quite a lot. It is a good thing. Right, and so to the Vantage on circuit after the road. The gear shift indicator is quite small. They tell me before production starts they will make it a little bit larger, which I think is a good thing because it is slightly hard to see. Right, this is in sport at the moment. This is the control that takes it through to Sport Plus, into track, and the dampers get firmer each time. But the chief engineer says that the individual mode, which he likes, has got the dampers knocked back just one from sport, because this is a slightly bumpy circuit. On back from track, sorry. So Sports Plus on the damper settings, which lets you roll a little bit more, lean up against the edge of the car's grip, and just gives it a bit more absorbance through some of the mid-corner bumps and things like that. If you just run up to sort of steady state to the limit, with feet off everything, feet off the brakes and everything, you do run up to just a little bit of understeer, which is not surprising. There is a big engine in the front, it's rear-wheel drive, that is the way these things are, and the way they should be actually for safety. However, if you just ease the brakes off, just slowly bleed them off as you come towards turning in, and keep some weight on the nose in the best front engine rear wheel drive form, there is a really lovely sort of easy balance to it, and then you get options on the way up. Okay, first lap proper. Gear ratios are about 5% shorter than they were on the old Vantage. It revs to 7 where there is a soft limiter. Brake pedal feel is really strong. And then, because I'm in the mode of stability on, it won't push into oversteer. What you can do, push the stability button. If you push it once, it goes into a track mode. If you keep your finger on it, it goes off, but it gives you a 8-stage traction control, and then the drive mode controller becomes the controller for that. It defaults to 5, which is in the middle, or turn it round. Let's put it on 5 and see what it does on the way out of the corner. Right, so that second gear, give it everything, and it just lets the car move around ever so slightly. You turn it all the way down to 1, it doesn't let it move around so much at all. And now on 8, there's one after 8 goes to off. So let's try that. So that is a third gear bend. That was sort of 4,000 revs accelerating from, now it's at 5. Just sort of feel the chassis start to move around a bit. There is a temptation, I think, if you had to come from, it's really nice, if you were to come from a car that had a very high revving, peaky sort of engine, there are a lot of corners on this Monte Blanco circuit you might take in second or third. I think in this car, even though the ratios are shorter than they were previously, you'd maybe go a gear higher, because that is a sort of tightish hairpin that I've just taken in third that would in some cars be second. And this one, a long right hander, is actually in fourth, and from 3,500 revs it's got oomph. It is tempting sometimes to choose one lower because you think actually I'm going to get more throttle response out of it, especially if you want to just, that's second then. But I think, which gives you sort of some option to mess around, but I think in a way, similar sort of speed corner, I'll take it in third. It takes a while for the car to warm up, for the turbos to spool, and then you just kind of surf the torque on the way out and let that mess around with the chassis that way. And I think that's probably the way to do it. Aston says this is not a track car. I think it's nicer to just sort of ride through the mid-range, stay on a steadier throttle and let it just straighten itself rather than going absolutely mad sideways. And that is really nice, and then you're sort of able to develop a nice smooth flow, trail the brakes in, get it planted, do what you want on the throttle on the way out, straighten it, slightly over straighten it. It's quite a relaxed car. It's really good fun. And there may well be an F1 edition or a more sporty edition later. This is the base model, which now costs £165,000 on the road. It has the power, it has the muscle, it certainly has the looks to compete with the stuff that is around it. I like it a lot. I think when it arrives in the UK, which is soon, customer deliveries I think started towards the end of May, so not long after this video goes live. When we get one in the UK, we will test it against something else, which will be on this channel and in the magazine, which you can find at autocar.co.uk or over at themagazineshop.com/autocar, which has access to our entire 129-year archive. I recommend it to you. It is it's a brilliant resource, it really is. So thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time.